The U.S. midterm elections saw the biggest one-day post-election rally since 1982. With uncertainty about control of Congress out of the way, there are plenty of other concerns on the horizon. We are in the longest bull market in history, but a bear market is an eventual reality. I'm joined by Jim Rogers, investor, businessman, as well as author at the NASDAQ. We'll be talking about global fundamentals. Jim, so great to have you here today.
So you know there's going to be a bear market again?
Well, hopefully not too soon, but it is an eventual reality.
Wise beyond your years, yes.
Well, I haven't been investing as long as you have, Jim, so you have been seeing what the market does, and eventually markets rise, markets do fall.
Remy, I know. Yes, I've been investing longer, but I've also read throughout history, and I know we always have bear markets. Now, Janet Yellen, who was head of the central bank in America, recently said, we're never going to have economic problems again. If you believe her, now she went to Yale. Yale got a PhD from Yale. She's an Ivy Leaguer, head of the Federal Reserve, so she probably knows more than both of us, she thinks.
Well, Jim, were you and Janet classmates?
No, I was an undergraduate at Yale. I didn't get a graduate degree at Yale, and certainly not a PhD in economics. It's hard enough to make a living without a PhD in economics from an Ivy League school.
Well, I know that you have been focusing on DC, and what better place to start than the Federal Reserve. Now, you have referred to it as an experiment. It's been a very long experiment if we're referring to the central bank as that. But there's also been a lot of focus on politics and what's been coming out of the White House, the ramifications of trade wars. And we know that whenever there are discussions about tariffs as well as geopolitics thrown in, there's a lot of uncertainty. Now, you have the perspective of living and doing business in Asia. So what's the conversation happening over there?
Well, first of all, it's very clear in Asia that Mr. Trump is making China great again. You know, he set out to make America great again. He's certainly making China great again. When he pulled out of Asia, the Chinese looked around and said, what? He's leaving the whole place to us. And the Japanese and the Koreans and everybody else said, well, this is good news. Good news, because now we don't have to worry so much about the Americans. But they all do see what America's doing. Most people know that trade wars have never been good for anybody. Most people know that trade wars have failed always and hurt a lot of people. Mr. Trump either doesn't know history, actually Mr. Trump may, but he thinks he's smarter than history, and maybe he is smarter than history, but nobody else ever has been.
And now that we've covered that, I do want to get your take on different regions in the world. I understand that your investments have changed, especially when it comes to the BRIC nations. So why has that happened, and what do you foresee?
Well, Remy, I've been investing a long time, and I have learned that the world is always changing, always. And whatever you think today is not going to be true in 10 or 15 years. You have to understand that about the world, or you're not going to be very successful at anything, and especially not at investing. So as the world changes, I try to change with it. The United States stock market is at all-time highs. That normally is not a good time to be investing in a country. Chinese stock market is down 60% from its all-time highs. Russia's hated. Sugar, oh, sugar's an embarrassment. You should look at places like that. I have experienced over my lifetime that that's where you should look, not at places making all-time highs.
And we've been seeing a lot of ups and downs for the U.S. equity markets in 2018. And each time the market dips, then people become really concerned about the longevity of this bull market. But for the time being, it does appear that levels are holding. And when it comes to the long term, of course, given the current valuations, when a bear market does come, it could mean disaster for a lot of investors. But do you think investors should move away from ETFs?
You are wise beyond your years. Well, the problem with ETFs, or the advantage of ETFs, is it's a very simple way to invest. I use them. I'm lazy. I know it's an easy way to invest. But the problem, Remy, is we all own ETFs, and they all own the same stocks. So when the bear market comes, everybody's going to sell the ETFs, and therefore everybody's going to sell the same stocks. Ooh, it's going to be a bloodbath. Bear markets always lead to bloodbaths, but now with such a huge concentration in so few names, they're going to go down more than even they would normally go down. I was interested in your comments before about some of the kinds of stocks going up in the U.S. That's where all the money is. And
Sure.
every time there's been a big bear market, the places where everybody is invested, those are the ones that get hurt the most.
Indeed, there's been a lot of focus on the tech sector as of late, given what's happening not just in the US, but also in Asia in terms of that sector. I know that you also pay attention to the agricultural sector. So why does it interest you so much?
Well, agriculture has been a disaster. I mean, in the past 30-odd years, agriculture has been a nightmare. I mean, the average age of farmers in America is now 58. Nobody wants to be a farmer. More people in America study public relations than study agriculture because it's been a horrendous place to be. The highest rate of suicide in the UK is in agriculture. It's been a nightmare. So it's going to change. We've had long periods in history when the producers of real goods have been on top, followed by long periods when the financial types have been on top. But it always changes, and it's changing again. Do you know how to drive a tractor?
I personally don't, Jim.
Well, I would urge you to learn how to drive a tractor. It will be a good skill in the next 20 years.
And Jim, since you mentioned tractors, I do want to get your take on what's been happening with farm equipment. So when we think about traditional farmers, third, fourth, fifth generation farmers, they take pride in their farming equipment, whether it's a tractor or a combine. But with the advent of technology, apparently there's been a wave of dissent amongst farmers because they need to rely on the tech companies if they need to fix their equipment. So they can't necessarily access the software that operates their farming equipment. And there have been a lot of associations, different states that have been trying to get bills passed so that their equipment can be fixed by their own hands versus relying on John Deere or other high-tech companies. So what do you think of that?
Well, as I said before, the world is always changing, always has, and always will be, and you can stand and fight against the tide.
Sure.
You know, Mr. Lear, King Lear, tried fighting against the tide. There have been people throughout history fighting against the tide, but it doesn't matter. The world is going to change no matter how much you fight, no matter how much foolish politicians fight. So don't worry, it's going to change, and new farmers will know what to do and how to solve the problems. I couldn't solve the problems. I couldn't even solve the problems for the old tractors, much less the new tractors, but somebody will. They'll learn, they'll adapt.
So would you suggest that I learn how to hack this system versus?
If I were you, I would learn how to drive a tractor,
Okay,
and I would
and then learn how to
and
hack
I would
it.
learn program.
Okay. Well,
I cannot do either. I cannot do either. But my children can program.
well, I'm sure if you wanted to, you could, Jim. Well, I do want to move back to a geographic location. I know that in the past you've said in 1807, if you're smart, you moved to London. 1907, you moved to New York.
Yep.
And 2007, moved to China. But here we are, it's almost 2019. If you're smart, where do you go?
Well, I was talking about centuries when I said that, and in 2007 I did move to Asia because that's why I said it. I still look, as I look out the window, I see that the 21st century will be the century of Asia, and specifically of China. That's where to be, and if I were you, I would learn to drive a tractor and move to Asia, if I were you. I've moved to Asia. Korea is probably going to be, once North Korea opens, which will happen very soon, Korea is going to be the most exciting country in the world for a while. I mean, it's right on the Chinese border, 80-odd million people, natural resources, cheap, disciplined labor, lots of things going forward. Other countries, we mentioned Zimbabwe, Ghana, Venezuela. Exciting things are happening in Venezuela right now. So there are other places, and there are always places in the world that are turning the corner.
Jim, it's interesting you mentioned that about Venezuela. When we read the headlines coming out of that country, they're not always so positive. So what do you see right there?
Yes, Remy, when you read the headlines, you must learn. I know you work for a news organization, but you must learn to look beyond the headlines to see what's really, really, really happening. The United States stock market's making all-time highs. Does that mean we should all pour into the U.S. and buy stocks? Probably not. Venezuela is a horrible disaster. It's one of the worst disasters in the history of mankind, yes. But they know it too now. they're smart enough to know that they've made many mistakes, and they're starting to change. They now have removed exchange controls. Unbelievable for a country like Venezuela. They're starting to try to figure out, oh my gosh, what do we do next? That's when you buy. You find a country that's at the bottom where changes are starting to take place. Venezuela at times has been one of the richest countries in the Western Hemisphere, and it will be again.
That's very interesting to hear, but I know that you can spot opportunity, and you've been investing for a long time. I know that it's a long ways away from the days of you being at Dominic and Dominic, for
Oh, yes.
example. So before I let you go, what are some tips you have for younger investors out there who are just getting into the market?
Well, first of all, yes, I have been investing along it, but Remy, I've made a lot of mistakes. I can't tell you how many. You want to hear about my first wife? Oh my God, what a mistake. Oh, what a horrible mistake that was. So I have made many, many mistakes. My advice to everybody, young, old, is stay with what you know. Don't listen to me. Maybe listen to you, but don't listen to other people. Stay with what you know. Everybody watching this show knows a lot about something. That's where you should start. Don't listen to other people. Stay with what you know. Find the investments there. If I told you you can only have 20 investments in your life, you would be very careful about what you invest. And that's how you become successful.
And Jim, I know that in the past you have also said that put your eggs in one basket, but how do you know that basket is the right one?
That's what I say. You stay with what you know. You don't go jumping around because some guy like me. You stay with what you know. When you find a great opportunity, you pour in. Now, if you get it wrong, you're going to get wiped out with all of your eggs in one basket. But if you want to get rich, that's how you do it. You don't go put something here, something there, something there. So you focus with what you know. When you know something's going to be exciting and successful, put your eggs in that basket, but watch the basket very, very closely.
Okay, Jim, well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Oh, that's delightful, Remy. Let's do it again sometime.
Thank you.